So I read 4 ARCs, or advanced reader copies of vampire fiction this past year, and I wanted to talk a little bit about them. So that's what I'm doing today. First one I want to touch on is Winterly by Jeanine Croft. So this book here is a self-published endeavor, and it's part of a series. I believe the series is titled Dark Creatures. And it is a paranormal romance, adult paranormal romance, I have to specify that. And it follows 2 siblings, primarily Emma and her, I can't remember her sister's name, but Emma is the character we're following primarily. This takes place in the later Victorian era, so later on in the 1800s, and there's this noble, Marcus Winterly, who she becomes enthralled with. He becomes enthralled with her. He eventually invites her to his castle, and all that happens with that. So if you're someone who's into paranormal romance, I think this book is actually pretty decent, especially for a self-published endeavor. This book and another one of the author's books were published pretty close together, so I like to consider this as kind of a debut thing, which for a debut it's not bad. I really liked the fact that it felt like when you were reading the book that you were actually reading about people from the time period, because the way it was written, it very much echoed the way people think and spoke in that time period. So that was nice. The relationship between Emma and her sister could have been elaborated upon a little bit, but I did like it. Love me some good, positive sibling relationships. How vampires, witches, and werewolves are justified in this series is very interesting. And it's not the first time such an approach has been made, but this implementation was rather nice. I don't know if this is a thing for everything in paranormal romance, or romance in general, but I just really liked the fact that Emma was very much a go-getter and did what she wanted to do, even if it wasn't considered appropriate for a woman in that time period, you know. Pretty much everything that occurred to her in the book was a result of something that she chose to do, more or less. And that especially comes into play when it comes to her relationship with Marcus Winterly, because it could have easily gone a little more south, and it could have been where, you know, he kind of forced the relationship. But he didn't. It was ultimately her choice as to whether it went that far or not, and I do respect that. If there's one huge gripe, and I mean bigger than normal, I'm not opposed to reading books that are really long, have a lot of description, a lot of detail. Because if it's written well enough, you don't really notice it, right? I mean, you do, but you don't. In this book, you really notice when there's too much detail. There was at least a few chapters that I felt could have been axed completely, and it wouldn't have made a difference in the story. Did I really need to read a chapter where all the Emma and her sister were doing were going in the carriage to the castle, and there was like no real character development or plot development along the way, other than trying to set a much more eerie tone? I didn't feel it was necessary, personally. So Winterly, for me, was a 3-star book, which is pretty average. It meant I enjoyed it enough that I will very likely read the sequel when it comes out. If for no other reason than just to see what happens, because the end of the book it was kind of a cliffhanger. It'll be interesting to see where Emma and Marcus go from there, particularly in regards to Emma's sister. This next book is the only traditionally published book out of the 4 ARCs that I read, and that is Dracula's Child by J.S. Barnes. Now, this book, published by Titan, it is this author's attempt at a sequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula, which so many authors have done over the years. Dracula is public domain, so they're allowed to do it. And this one takes place some years down the line, when Mina and Jonathan Harker's son Quincy is about maybe 10 years old, and he begins to hear things and manifest certain things in connection to Dracula. And a bunch of events unfold, and it's, how should I put this? It's a little more action-oriented than the original Dracula book. Still doesn't end on much of a cliffhanger, though. Not too much. But it was, in my opinion, a better ending than the original Dracula book. Which might sound controversial, but that's what I think. I think probably the biggest hurdle with this book, and also one of its biggest positives, it's a bit of both, is like Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's written in an epistolary format. And if you don't know what that means, that basically epistolary literature are basically, the story is put together by combining letters and telegrams, and, or if it's a modern one, say emails or whatever, that when put together in chronological order form the story. So you're not focusing on any one particular character specifically. It's through multiple formats you experience the story in a multitude of ways. It's a very interesting approach. It does keep it in line with the original Dracula book, so that's nice. That does keep some level of consistency. And it also keeps a certain level of mystery for a decent chunk of the book as well, which I did appreciate. It is, to me, it is an average book. It is 3 stars. It is good. It is good. I definitely will own my own copy of this book one day soon. I find the epilogue of the book, there is one letter that serves as an epilogue to the book, and I won't say anything else about it, but I don't know if this author tends to go any further, but man, it has implications. Some rather interesting implications. This next one I'm not going to dwell on very long because I've already ranted and raved about it in a prior video, which you can check out over here if you haven't seen it already, and that is Forever 51 by Pamela Skjolsvik. If you really want to know the details, just watch the video I linked and find out that way. I really, really did not like it at all. I think I gave it 1 star, maybe 2 at the most. I don't even think I put a 2, but this last one I actually finished at the start of 2021, but because I started reading it in the last few months of 2020, I'm gonna count it for this video. And that is Slay, Stories of the Vampire Noir. Now, I've described this book a little bit before. Essentially, it is from an independent press, Mocha Memoirs Press, edited by Nicole Kurtz, and it is a collection of stories that are written almost entirely by Black authors. And the protagonists of these stories are all Black characters. And it was such an interesting read, such a variety of tales, not just of vampires, but of vampire-like beings, which harkens back to another short story collection I read a while back from much older stories put together that does the same kind of thing. Multiple types of beings that subsist on blood or on energy in some kind of a vampiric-like fashion, parasitic fashion. And it was definitely a pretty cool read. I gave it 4 stars. I wanted to do better as a rating, but because there's such a variety of authors, and these authors are at different points in their skills and their careers, that some of them hit really well, some of them were kind of and some of them were middle of the road, right? So it was good enough for me to settle it at 4 stars, and it's pretty much the only anthology of its kind, or at least the first one of its kind. And I really look forward to if they do another one of these. Like, if they do a second short story collection like this one, I will totally buy it and read it. Easily. Alright, there we have it. There is a basic rundown of the 4 vampire arcs or advanced reader copies that I read from Netgalley late last year and early this year. So if you have checked out any of these books before, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. And if not, maybe you'd want to check them out for yourself. Maybe they're your thing, maybe they're not, who knows. In any case, thank you for watching this video today, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!